Oh, it's getting there. We're here. So it's working.
What people can't hear because we're not live is at the beginning of that music, that cheesy music that Harry spent ages composing. I'm in the background dancing away to it. Ding, ding.
I know. We saw you, mate. You know, you saw us taking some hints, taking some clues from you. Because they haven't done being fashionable and trendy hasn't quite reached Devon and Cornwall yet, but we're getting there. We are getting there.
About 50 years you'll be there.
I'm learning all I have from you. How are you, mate? You completely dogged me in it last year. Have you got that little dog with you at the moment? Anywhere near you?
She's gone out, but she'll be back in a minute. And when she is, you can all say, "Oh, isn't she lovely?"
And I have to apologise for letting the dog out the bag, so to speak.
Yeah, well, I was in the darkest Kent picking her up, and they had no internet at all. They've only it's so deepest and darkest. They only lost their snow a few days ago. They'd had it for ages. But I dropped you in it, didn't I, mate?
You did, mate, and it was nothing because I just prior to that.
No, I saw the viewing figures, and I want to have a word with all you lot out there because the viewing figures were through the roof. So clearly, there's no point in being here.
No, what they were thinking is this is so crap so far. He's obviously leaving something good at the end, and I think that was what it was.
I think that's what they think about us every week. They don't get anywhere though.
It does.
Right, I want to make an apology now because where our guest is from, and I don't want this to make this sound bad for Arthur because it's not bad at all. Because where Arthur's from, I'm from a few miles down the road. So as the interview goes on, you'll hear me sound a bit more like the Southeast London boy that I actually am. My posh Hertfordshire voice will disappear to be replaced by my childhood Southeast London voice.
Geezer, yeah, but that's the trouble here. I'll start bleeding across from a very broad Cornish accent that you can hear me talking now.
Your posh Bentley voice.
That's it, mate. Oops, just hit the microphone. Shall we? I'll tell you what. Shall we get him on? Because
they need give more. One shout out before he goes.
Oh yes, do it.
And that's Finn's Law Part 2. Look, I'm wearing my Finn's Law Part 2 t-shirt. We know there's been enormous pressure on MPs and the leader of the House of Commons to make time for Finn's Law Part 2. If you don't know what that is, it's the increase in sentencing for the animal welfare bill, which will say the animal welfare bill, which will include service animals and therefore Finn's Law. We need to continue that pressure because we know they're listening and that they're creaking under the pressure. Keep it polite. Send the leader of the House, Jacob Rees-Mogg, an email, and your own MP an email telling them they must find time. Tell them to get on with it. Be polite. And I'm pretty sure we'll be able to have it heard and up into the Lords before the session finishes in a couple of months' time. That's it. I will
get onto that straight after. I know my MP's bloody good with it as well. So, but they do like the individual emails. They don't like copy and paste from everywhere. So that is really good.
Oh, we got someone in it. You must know about that. The bomb in Exeter and everyone's hiding. Yeah. Arthur's got a story about a bombed out.
Oh yeah, right. yeah. No, it's a big bomb in Exeter. So, and like some of our cities, it would cause more than 20 quid's worth of damage in Exeter because they're quite posh in there. So, did I get away with that one? Did I? Probably.
Just.
Okay. Right. Well, welcome to everyone. This is a beauty for me. I must say, I've got a little bit of a crush here with this guy. I must admit, I do like him. Yeah, I love him. I love him to bits. Arthur Smith, he's an alternative comedian, presenter and writer. He's a Radio 4 presenter, Excess Baggage and Loose Ends, and nominations for the Laurence Olivier Award for Best New Comedy. I noticed that award. Very well known for Grumpy Old Men, which we're going to talk about a little bit as well. And a lot of work and involvement with new comedians, I noticed. He's always doing sort of trying to spur the next generation on, which is really, really cool. Very much involved with the Edinburgh Fringe. What we're talking about here in particular, though, I hope, is his father was amongst other exciting things, a police officer in the 1950s. PC Sid patrolled London's South Bank and met a gallery of characters whom he tried his best not to arrest, I understand. So, welcome to Arthur. How are you, my friend?
Well, thank you very much. I don't have a South London accent anymore. No, I'm a proper South Londoner. And all North Londoners can piss off this.
Arthur and I were saying before this to you guys listening that when we were both lads, when we were both youngsters, I used to think that anyone north of the Thames was a northerner, was northern scum, and Arthur agreed.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my dad was the same. I mean, it's been a big joke for centuries, really. The north v south. It's like the clotted cream and jam with Devon and Cornwall.
Yeah,
it's the same sort of made up. But
just mention that. Just mention clotted cream which way up on Twitter, and it will fill your timeline for months.
Well, that'll save having to do anything else.
It will indeed.
Let them argue it out amongst themselves. So just to alienate the Northerners, have you got any Northern jokes? We had a little one before you came on, didn't we?
Well, I'll do that one again. It was only two of me. Yeah, no, I sometimes say in North London they have little blue plaques commemorating famous people. In South London, we have big yellow signs saying, "Did you see this murder?"
Love it. And before we go on any further,
if I'm doing gigs, I've gone again.
Oh, right. No, you are. You were there. Stay there, and I'll bring it on in a minute. Then.
All right, yeah. Well, I was going to say, when I do gigs, I sometimes say, "We got any South Londoners in?" Really, and I do a bit, and I'll say, "Any North Londoners?" They go, "Yeah," and I say, "Scum."
That is the thing. The one thing you never admit, any coppers in here. No, yeah, but then coppers look like coppers. That's the trouble.
I had a friend who was a bit dodgy, and you could always spot an undercover copper by their shoes, apparently.
Oh, okay. Well, now they all wear North Face fleeces and shirts, so you can still spot them a mile off.
You can. I must admit, they do. They do stick out a mile. So we put this thing on. I put this thing together, which is aligned with us. You see now, Dave. You've mixed around now, but never mind.
I've been promoted.
Now, Dave, you and I clearly, and Arthur, we had to find this ugly app that we can put our photos in to make us look atrocious. Which is on the side because there's no way you look like that naturally, is there?
I had a tough paper round in southeast London. We used to have to carry weapons, everything.
Yeah,
I look about 150, but yeah. Very quickly then, let's get the grumpy old men bit over really, because we want to go on to really the relationship with your dad and the fact because the fact because he was a police officer in the 1950s after quite an exciting war years as well, which we'll just touch on as well, Arthur, if that's all right. But grumpy old men, is that really the big? You're doing a lot of things at the moment still, and more so with the Edinburgh Fringe and radio and in the radio. But I looked at that grumpy old men, and it's just beautiful viewing today. Even all those
I haven't really watched it for years actually, but it was fun to do. And I'm not really actually that grumpy, but if they're paying me, I will be.
Yeah,
it's true because I've noticed that you are not grumpy. But I tell you what, if we can just bring on, I'm just going to bring this on just to remind people, and this is just a short, sort of 10-second clip. Just see this.
And so the last word on grumpiness. Well, we had a sweep in the office and came to a unanimous view. Who better to leave us with a single thought for the day than that quintessential embodiment of grumpiness, that poet of our dead society, Arthur.
This is another thing. You get people say, carpe diem. Ever since that film, carpe diem, seize the day. That's what you got to do, seize the moment. Sometimes don't seize the day. Sometimes let the day have a little run by itself. Let the day go off a little bit by itself. Maybe ignore the day for once. Don't getting out there seizing the day every day. All these people that sort of jab you, say, live every moment.
There we go. All these little individual things, and I was listening to a few, and you just get attached into it, and it is these little things, and they are sort of timeless, but we just add stuff onto them, don't we? Really?
Oh yeah, especially in the internet age, there's so many things to be annoyed about. A lot of people, that's all they ever do all day, just sit and get angry on Twitter, as far as I can make it.
Yeah, I know, it's ridiculous. What a way to live your life. I love how, I guess the sign of a good comedian is how, you can observe all these things, and with your dry sense of humour, just have the whole audience in absolute, laughter. I'm sure there's not much difference between our age, but I grew up watching you on TV and stuff like that, and hilarious. And I know there are some jokes that might not be appropriate for 4 o'clock in the afternoon on our show, but they're absolutely.
I just watched the best joke in the world ever, and you did it
Was that
at a
Linda
memorial, and
Smith's?
it was
Yeah.
well. Let's say if it was the C bomb, and it was
Why?
a joke that was about 30 seconds long, but it said the C bomb about 45 times, and I thought, well, maybe I could. But
And the punchline to it is absolutely perfect. We'll share it.
it is.
At a later date.
It is. Look, before we go on, there's a very special lady who does a lot for Thin Blue Poor charities and helps us. And her name is Debbie Horton. Debbie's had a bit of a rough time recently with her health and things. So if we can just wish her well, Arthur, if you could just Debbie Horton for us, just say hello to her.
Debbie Horton, keep going, girl. You're going to make it, and we're going to see you all soon. And lots of love. Get well soon.
That's it, because we need her to raise money for us as well. So that's brilliant. Thank you so much. Right, Arthur, your dad starts at Alamein, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And what happened there with your
father?
father?
My dad, he was called up when he was 19, and after training, he was sent all the way around the coast of Africa on a boat, which an American boat, which had half American soldiers, half British soldiers. And in fact, he ended up boxing for the British side. But anyway, they went all the way around the coast of Africa, up to Cairo, and then across, and he ended up at El Alamein, where he went over the top of the Second Battle of El Alamein, and he was captured. I mean, there were 14,000 people killed, and he was captured. Then, where he was paraded through the streets of Palermo. Then he was starving in an Italian prisoner of war camp, where his weight dropped to 6.5 stone. He's about the same size as me. I have a bit of a gag with that as well, because he told me how they used to eat rats. And I said to him once, I said, Dad, what does rat taste like? He said, oh, it's a bit like dog. But he then he was slave labour down a copper mine in Saxony, and then he finished the war in Colditz Castle, which of course was very famous. It became famous because it was, and mostly there was officers though. And my dad, essentially, his job was to look after some of the poshest guys who were there, the prominente who could potentially be used as hostages. There was Lord Lascelles and Giles Romilly's son and a friend of Winston Churchill. And my dad essentially was to kind of wipe their arse for them. So my joke is that, he had to wipe the arse of old Etonians, as we must all continue to do, it seems.
Metaphorically speaking, we do.
And then
exactly
he was
that.
finally liberated by the Americans in 1945, came back home and eventually signed up with the police, because his dad was a copper and so were two of his brothers. So, it seemed like the obvious thing. And he became, PC Sid Smith of the Metropolitan Police Kennington branch, parading, and he was on the beat. I mean, do they still have the beat anymore? It's not so much, is it?
Yeah, not so much, though,
Yeah, and he used to be on nights, and he used to do a sort of 8-hour just walking through the night where there wasn't much going on. But then he'd often have to mainly deal with drunks who used to, that was what his main thing was, it would seem. And then eventually, he then got into cars and became a proper driver of police cars. And then he ended up as pretty much the jailer at Kenya. Where was it? Anyway, he was like the sergeant in charge of the prisoners. And but he never rose above the rank of PC, although my mother wanted him to. And I never really quite knew why, but I know there was a lot of dodgy stuff going on then, and he didn't really want to get involved in it, I think. There was quite a lot of corruption in the police.
So what did you hear? What did you sort of? Because sort of how old were you? Well, how long was he in the police force, and how much in your childhood did that reflect?
Well, I always remember as a child, we were just getting up to go off to school, and he'd come in after a night shift, and he'd had those blue shirts with the kind of collar that you used to sort of button on, or so. He used to take that off and sit there looking tired. But he never talked much about what he was up to. But we persuaded him to write a kind of memoir when he retired. So I've got this wonderful book with his copper plate writing where he describes his time in the war and lots of funny stories about being in the police. So just arbitrarily, I think the one, because I don't know if you've had to do this, but he had to go and tell people that someone had died. Which I imagine must be, and he was terrified to do this. He didn't really want to, so he had to go to this top of a block of flats in Vauxhall and knock on the door, and a lady answered, and he said, "Are you Mrs. So-and-so?" And she said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, I very much regret to tell you that your husband has died." And she said, "Has he?" and shut the door. And
you never know how people are going to react. I'm not sure I've ever had a reaction like that before.
How do you do that? Just
like that, mate. Yeah, you go and knock on someone's door and turn their world upside down. But normally they've got a sixth sense. They always say that. Well, I knew you were coming, or they see the vehicle pull up outside and the world falls out of their. So the bottom falls out of their world. Literally, it's never a nice task.
Not the world falls out of their bottom. Then that would be.
It's interesting because very, very similar to your situation with your dad is I went to someone to say that their son had killed himself, and it was after a long period of mental health, and he'd had several attempts before. So and mother was there on her own, and she was just clinging off me, screaming wailing like a banshee, absolutely screaming, and she slapping me with a tea towel and things, and I knew that. Whatever reactions you get, I mean, there are dozens and dozens of people I've told in the past. And of course, a husband came in and he was the size of a small castle. This man comes in with big work boots and I'm thinking, oh, sugar. And he said, and all he said was, dead, is he? Is he dead? Done it, has he? Right, okay. And it was just almost like I'm sure he acted differently later, but it's almost like a release of years and years and years and years of trauma and worrying and police officers at the door. And I've just realised the two very different reactions from one couple. Really. Yeah. But so you did hint on it, and so it'd be really interesting about the sort of corruption in the past. Did you reflect very much on that in the past of what?
Well, he never really talked about it, other than he told me once, because betting was illegal then, wasn't he? A sergeant once stuck a 10-bob note in his pocket to say leave them alone type thing. He was a very, very honest man, and he didn't want to get involved in all that. And I think he preferred being out on the beat. He never really liked arresting anybody.
Nothing's changed there. We never.
Well, there are some, aren't there? I imagine there must be some coppers. That's their favourite thing, nicking people.
Well,
did you get a bonus or something?
No, you don't. I've worked with people, and Harry will have done as well, who is like an obsession to them, and they'll go and grab anyone for anything, even if they know it's not going to get past the custody sergeant. And then you've got other people who somehow seem to manage to go the whole career without arresting anybody. But, if there's someone there that needs nicking, I'll nick them, but I won't nick them just for the sake of it.
My dad had a very good story. In fact, I've got the picture of it. I might go and get it. Because he used to get very pissed women sometimes coming out. And he had this very drunken woman came up to him and trying to kiss him. And this was outside the old Vic, just as the crowd was coming out. And so everyone was gathering around laughing. Oh, there's the picture. Well done.
Yay!
That is my dad. In about 1954, that woman was determined to kiss him, and everyone was.
It's Dave's problem. He has all the time.
With that shake as well.
And he said to her, he said, "Look, if
he gets pissed and starts trying to kiss police officers." But anyway,
yeah, and I remember my dad saying that he'd said to her, "Look, if you don't stop, I'm going to have to arrest you." And she said, "Yeah, go on, arrest me. I fancy that." And so he had to.
It's just a beautiful photo as well.
Yeah,
actually,
it's just a photo ever, because he just looks so embarrassed.
I don't know. Do you know what? He feels as though he's taking it all in his stride. Yeah. Here's another one. It's sort of.
He would have been. He'd have been quite unlucky for someone to have, I don't know what date that was, but for someone to have been to be wandering down the street with a camera. Whereas nowadays, when we're policing, people are always shoving cameras in our.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, there was a photographer there, and there were two pictures arrived in the station a week later, and all the coppers were laughing at it. Obviously,
Yeah.
He would never have lived it down, especially in the police.
No. And it's just the shop there and things. It's just it's just such a shame that sort of is gone now, isn't it? Because when you walk down the high street now, you just look above the top half, and it's beautiful.
He had to deal with a lot of drunks as well. And he was actually a very fit man. He was a great sportsman and a boxer. He'd been he nearly offered to be a professional boxer. So he used to make him laugh because these sort of drunks would come swinging at him, and he could really just push him over with his finger,
Yeah.
But it was
very popular, wasn't it, in South London? My dad grew up in South East London, and the bloke across the road used to spar with Henry Cooper when they were lads. It was very popular, wasn't it? It was a way to keep youngsters occupied, wasn't it? Back.
I remember growing up at that time, as I think I mentioned to you earlier, that when it was like in the 50s, and London was just a series of bomb sites then. And that was like really the best place you could ever go and play as a kid, was on a bomb site. We had one directly opposite us. We lived in police flats. And, you never know if you might find, endless splinters of shells and things. And then my mate Raymond found a hand grenade once. That was really exciting.
Honestly, is that why you had big families in London, is it? No. Tell me, because actually, when you were a child with your dad once, you got a bit worried because a couple of drunks came running up to him, did they?
Yes.
Do you remember?
Yeah. Well, I was. We were in Kennington Road or somewhere, and I was out, and he was off duty then, and these two drunks came running up to him, shouting, "Hey, see!" And I was really scared, but they ran past me and went to Sid and said, "Is this your nipper?" And they were two blokes he'd arrested several times, but obviously he was always really nice to them, so he was popular. Also, there were quite a lot of he had to deal with a lot of Rasta guys who were getting nicked for smoking dope, and he was always able to impress them because his father had been in royal protection for a bit and was looked after Haile Selassie. Now I don't know if remember,
Yeah.
And Haile Selassie had invited, Sid's dad to go and have dinner with him at his posh home. And so Sid years later used to tell the Rasta guys, "Hey, I knew the emperor of Ethiopia."
But coming from South East London, we had lots of Jamaicans, lots of Rastafarians, and so I know a little bit. And I got a very good friend who's a Rastafarian. And so I know a tiny bit, but Haile Selassie, I mean, basically God.
He was
a Rastafarian.
Yeah. So they were really impressed that Sid had met Haile Selassie.
That'd get you out of trouble someday, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
It does remind me when I was in Newquay and I was walking with my she was about 83 years old then. She's 85 now, bless her. My mother, and across the Barrowfields into town, and this vagrant he was quite drunk, and he was quite a big man, and he was bumbling all over the place. And because I do the VIP protection, I was just saying bye my mother like that next to her, and then I sort of just went slightly between him and her in case. And he starts making a beeline for her, and I thought, oh, okay. And he goes, "Hello, Mrs. Tangy," and she says, "Hello, Gerald. How are you, darling?" Because she works in the soup kitchen, and I thought, well, there's a lesson of stereotyping to Mr. Tangy. I felt a right fool, I must admit. But you're still learning lessons.
I used to work in pubs in South London, Arthur. I used to all the way from sort of Bromley up to Dulwich and places like that.
Well, you're fired from it all every time then. Why you doing so many?
You get moved around a lot. But the biggest part, I used to work on Lordship Lane in Dulwich, and there was a big Rastafarian and Jamaican community, and this guy came in and everyone was a bit sort of worried about him, and then the whispers came round that he was a bit of a yardie. I mean, you couldn't really understand what he was saying because he had a really thick Jamaican accent, but he asked for this one drink, and I went out of my way to make sure I got it, basically so he didn't kill me. And then this numpty came in. I can't even remember what his problem was. I think he was just really ridiculously pissed. And this yardie bloke, this Jamaican, could see I was getting lots of aggro from him. And literally all he did, he was about 6'2" and built like a brick house. And he literally walked up to the bar, said something to him that I still have no idea what he said to him, and the bloke left. It really wasn't someone to mess with. So having people like that on your side isn't always a bad thing.
So would you? Right, so the usual questions would be, what would you be if you weren't a comedian? And is anywhere in that list that you would have been a police officer?
No, absolutely not. I mean, for one, my dad never really wanted us to. He did. I don't think he really wanted to be a police officer. There wasn't much else going, and I think he'd have been better off in PR or something, because he liked sort of helping people. He did like that aspect of the job, giving
He was
people
more
direction.
neighbourhood, wasn't he? Yeah, he was neighbourhood.
Yeah. So no, it never. He didn't encourage us in that at all, and especially. In fact, although he helped me, I remember that just before I left university, I went to East Anglia University, and I got nicked for stealing a Cornish pasty from the university supermarket.
My county food, right?
Yeah, no, I love it. Anyway, and so they took me. I mean, I was a pretty scruffy student, so they ended up taking me down. I mean, that's all I'd nicked. I'm paid for the pint of milk I'd got. But anyway, they took me down to the police station in Norwich, and I think they thought maybe I was on, because I was such a sort of scruffy hippie looking that they searched me for drugs. I didn't have any, but. And then they went away, and I was sat there thinking, "Oh God, I'm really interested." And what's he going to say about this? And then they came back, and one of them said, "Is your dad a police officer?" And I said, "Oh God, yes, he is." I said, "All right, you can go then."
Hey.
So I always thank my dad for that, although I never told him about it, and I probably wouldn't be telling you now if he was still alive.
So you're surrounded by all these people that do normal jobs. I'm not saying being a comedian is not a normal job, but it isn't. And then you went and I saw a clip of you trying to give a Daily Telegraph journalist lessons in how to be a comedian.
So I saw that.
You've either got it. You've either got it or you haven't, and that bloke clearly didn't. He might have had some material, but he just didn't know how to get it across. How'd you get into comedy?
Well, first you want to have to try and do it. You must enjoy. I mean, I think I realised when I was about 8 or something, and I was at Southwark Park Primary School, and the teacher said, "We're going to do a version of Peter Pan, if anyone would like to, so in front of the school." And I was very excited. And that night I went home and wrote Peter Pan, my version of it, which was presumably unperformable. But then she said, "Well, you can play any part you want." So I chose to be Captain Hook. And I was meant to come on in front of the school and the parents with my, I had a coat hanger hook, obviously, that my mother had given me. Coming on, determined to frighten everybody. But they all started laughing instead. And the more I tried to terrorise everyone, the more they started laughing. And I thought, oh, this is quite good, this laughter thing. I quite enjoy making people laugh. I mean, I didn't think at that time I could ever make a living out of it, although my granddad on my mother's side had been a sort of minor artist in the music hall. So I had a bit of showbiz in me. And then I went to university, and we were always doing reviews. And then we went to the Edinburgh Festival. And I was in a band as well for a bit. I was always a bit of a one for showing off, and I like that. And then eventually I kind of started stand up. It takes a while. You have to find your own voice. When people start out, often they sound a bit like another comedian you've met, but you have to find your own. Once you found your own voice, then you can progress. And so eventually, I turned professional around the age of 30, and then I had a lot of success after that for a bit. I wrote a play called An Evening with Gary Lineker, which was the one that was nominated for the Olivier, and which there's talk of doing it again at the moment. I'll be pleased with that, because it's great if you've got a play on that's doing well and going. You don't have to do anything; you just sit on your arse and the money comes in.
You did some musical comedy recently as well, didn't you? Around that, didn't you? I understand.
Well, I did a show about Sid, in fact, where I also did Arthur Smith Sings Leonard Cohen, which I chose partly to do because it sounded like the grimmest evening of entertainment imaginable. But and then in fact, while I remember, if anyone's watching this who wants to help me with a bit of research into my dad's police records, and come to that, his military records, do have a word, and I'll sign you up and set you going, because I'm trying to research my dad's part, all the details of his war, and I know the basics, and similarly with the police, I've still got some great pictures that he had a friend in Kennington Police who was a really good cartoonist, and he used to draw hilarious cartoons. In fact, I've got one up there. Right, talk amongst yourselves. I'm going to go and get it and show it.
Yeah.
I think, Harry, there was someone, wasn't there, when we had JG on, who offered their help with some historical stuff. So
yes, it was.
And
I was thinking,
ask JG if he knows who it is.
I think we'll have some. I'm just going to get rid of that bright sun as well. Dave, you're on your own, mate.
Yay! That's it. Right, I can swear now.
Well, can you see that? That was when he retired. That was hang on, get it there. No, that way.
Yeah, it's all opposites.
That's the cartoon that his mate drew for him when he finally retired from the police.
Hang on a minute. We'll just bring you.
I'll put it back there.
Which is now broken, or is it all right? That's okay. I'm sure there will be, because I know in Devon and Cornwall Police we've got some researchers who are interested in military and police and that sort of thing. So I know even if they didn't down here, they would certainly know people who would. And I know. I just know my mum used to research our family history, and she's sort of past that side of things now. She was the secretary of the Cornwall Family History Society. So she'd say, I'd go to, what are you doing today, Harry? I'd say, oh, Mum, I'm doing some armed protection. It was at the Crown Court. It was for Operation Dinghy. It was a massive drugs importation thing. She says, oh, who's the judge? And I went, some Judge Overend, I think his name is. He seems a nice guy. Got a nice little black dog and all that. It's quite cute, She said, oh, I think he's your 13th cousin twice removed. And I ended up meeting him and shaking his hand.
Yeah, well, I got an email out of the blue a while back from a guy who it turned out was my cousin, because my granddad, the musical man, he was a bit of a ducker and diver. It turned out he'd impregnated a dancer during and she'd had twins, and so this was never known to me till I got a letter from him saying, "Oh, you're my cousin."
It's brilliant. My mum I remember her when I was at home. She shouted. She said, I found it. I went, what have you found? I found a bigamist in our family, she says. It's something to be proud of. Yeah. And it's when the Cornish miners, when the mines closed and they all went over to America. Of course, they went over to America and they set up lives and married other people sometimes, and left their Cornish wives behind.
I want to hear your proper Cornish accent.
Well, I was in Newquay, and I used to always say there was this Cornish girl called Jenny Crocker. Jenny Crocker. She used to serve ice cream at the shop, and she was as Cornish as you could get. But I can't really do that to him because I never really Newquay. You've got everybody there.
Yeah, that's it. We had one of his mates on the other week, another copper, Arthur, and every now and then it would come, like you're on today. Yes. So every now and then I slip back into Southeast London. When his mate was on the other week, they were like, oh, every now and then.
Hey, boy!
The Norfolk accent is also, because I was at, as I said, the University of Norwich, and I got to, what are you going to Swaffham, are you?
Swaffham. Yeah.
What are you going on to Swaffham, are you? That's my Norfolk accent, but I can't really do accents or voices, to be honest.
I'd love to be able to do them because it's so impressive when people can do all these things. But
going back to comedy, Arthur, I mean, I'm sure you must be able to write a book on how to cope with disappointment, how to cope with being, how to go out, poked fun at, because no doubt, and you're an incredible comedian, but you had to start somewhere, and you would have got up on stage and you would have done acts that you thought, I'll probably get a laugh, and they got nothing. And how does a comedian cope with that?
Well, you want to get you have to get used to heckling. I mean, silence is the worst thing in a way. I mean, at least with heckling, they're engaging with you. But I mean, every comedian has died on their arse numerous times. It's part of the thing. You just have to. And if you've died on your arse 3 times in a row, you should maybe consider going into another thing, I think. But you never really know what the audience is like. And I mean, I used to do the Comedy Store midnight show in Saturdays. Of course, everyone was pissed out of their head and shouting. And you have to, but the thing is, you should be, I always remember John Hegley, the Pat said, you should be 1 pint less pissed than the average member of the audience. And, the thing is, you've got to
only the 19 pints then.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that gave quite a lot of scope.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember actually the most brutal heckle I think I ever heard was this guy who was on before me once doing a sort of Frank Sinatra sort of, it wasn't very good. And suddenly a woman's voice rang out from the audience, "Excuse me, I think you really need to think about the way your life is going." Not just your acting shit. So is the whole point of it. I mean, it's quite a tough world, comedy, because, there's always new ones coming in and,
you're very different from the rest, because you do come across as this. You're sold as this grumpy old man who picks out those sort of things in life, those observations. But then you do some cracking jobs as well, and yet you're not. You're a very positive person, and But what I like about you as well, which it's rare nowadays, I think, is that guy that Dave you were talking about from the Telegraph. I felt for him because he was there in a suit, and he was doing these jokes, and the audience weren't laughing, and it was your sort of work class as such, and you were sort of trying to coax him along a bit, and then he said, "So, what do you think?" And you went, "Well, let's be fair, you'd have died on your arse with that one." And and you just think let's not mess about it. And he went, "Oh, I'll make a note of that then, shall I?" But you need that, don't you? You need to say, "Look, that didn't work." But then you were very positive. You pulled bits out. Now that was really good. That was really good. And then I was thinking, God, there's quite a lot to this, isn't there? Because you're saying you need 4. Good to have 4 punchlines with 1 joke, and you think, Jesus, it is quite involved, isn't it?
Well, I mean, there are lots of different types of comedy. There's slapstick comedy where you just come over and fall on your ass and get a laugh, or there's many different types. There's people who just come on and tell old jokes. I mean, my dad, funny enough, Sid, was a great fan of old jokes. I'm going to run 4 of his quick. Man goes to the doctor.
Go for it.
Okay, go on.
Right, a man goes to the doctor. The doctor says, "I'm afraid you're going to have to stop masturbating." "Oh, no," says the man. "Why?" "Well," says the doctor, "I'm trying to examine you." A man goes to the doctor. He says, "I can't say my THs or Fs." The doctor says, "Well, you can't say fairer than that then." 2 more. A man goes to the doctor with a bit of lettuce sticking out of his bottom. The doctor says, "It's just the tip of the iceberg." And finally, a man goes to the doctor. It's the same bloke, and frankly, given the state of the NHS and COVID, it's a miracle he can get this many appointments. Anyway, a man goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, "Bad news now." He says, "I'm afraid you've got Alzheimer's and you've got cancer." "Oh, well," he says, "at least I haven't got cancer."
Dave, the penny dropped slowly with that one. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And that's not even mentioning the cigarette machine and the peanuts, which I try to remember these. Yeah, it's just
I love that joke.
It is a great old joke.
I've been using that joke forever, that one.
The trouble is, you see, they don't have... Well, I'll tell the story, but remember, cigarette machines don't really exist anymore, do they?
No, of course. No. It's the same age. Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, let me try and remember it. Yeah, okay, yeah. So a man goes into a pub and he goes to the cigarette machine, and the cigarette machine says, "Piss off." And so he walks over to the bar, and there's some peanuts, and the peanuts say, "Oh, you're a very nice man, aren't you?" And he looks at the barman and says, "What's going on here?" And the barman says, "Well, I think I should have told you, the cigarette machine is out of order and the peanuts are complimentary."
It's just wonderful to have. It's so
I
rare.
love stuff like that. It's hilarious.
Well,
So
really,
rare to have
Sid had
jokes.
a whole pile of those. I mean, I could probably do about 20 minutes of just going through his old gags like that.
Are they in a book somewhere? Have you got those? Have you ever turned that into Sid's joke book? Or
Well,
You've written a few.
I've been asked to write a book around Sid's memoir, which is partly why I want to get anyone who can help me research his police and army records. But so I'm going to put a few in there. They never look quite the same written down, though. Obviously, they need to be.
No.
And anyway,
No.
that's not
It's
when
all in
I
the timing.
started doing comedy, it wasn't, they were a bit sneered at. They were like old jokes, that's for sort of Bernard Manning and people in frilly shirts and whatnot. And
it must, must be quite handy to have this toolbox full of jokes that if you think, oh crap, what's the next bit of my gig, you could just pull out a couple of Sid's old jokes. It just gives your brain time to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that it is. Because sometimes if you're doing a long show, you can kind of slightly lose your place, especially if you've been improvising a bit. I'll give you a couple of knock jokes because someone told me they're going out of fashion these days.
Not for ages.
But young people don't know what a knock joke is. But I'll give you one that this is appropriate, right? Knock.
Who's there?
No, who's there?
MAB. It's a big horse.
MAB. It's a big horse. Who?
Maybe it's a big horse. I'm a Londoner.
I'm going to find a Cornish version of that one. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I heard that you were in the Bill once.
Yes, I think I was. Yeah, I was playing.
Not stereotyping you, but were you a criminal? I'm
trying to remember. I think I was in it twice. I remember once I was in it, I think, as a drug dealer, I think. And there was another time where I was actually playing a copper, I seem to recall.
Oh,
wow.
I
shouldn't be so surprised.
No. I don't think I would have been. I never wanted to be a copper. And by the way, my just to alert you here, my uncle was the mayor of Falmouth for a bit.
Oh, blimey!
Whoa, that's the posh end of town.
Cornish royalty.
That's all maritime, and that's quite posh down there.
Yeah. I've done some gigs. I've done gigs all over Cornwall and walked most of the Cornish coastline in my time. Oh, I really miss being on a coastline somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
So do I. I mean, I used to work in London several times a year with the, it was the best thing of my job. I mean, I was going to fatal road accidents one day, which wasn't the best bit, and I was going to firearms jobs and then going to domestics, and then I was standing next to the Queen or in London with a very posh car that Range Rover lent us with a credit card and a Glock. And I'd go away for a week with some VIP.
Really? Presumably you'd have to spend a lot of time just sitting on your arse doing nothing.
There was no, because part of the VIP role is when your principal says, and royalty is different from government, but when your VIP says, so it was as an example, there was somebody who was going to a conference. There was two countries who were having a bit of a tete-a-tete, all right, a smaller island off a big country, all right, and unfortunately the Chinese had started putting their military bases in this little island. And so there was a little bit, they wanted to know much about this, right? Now, their conference, they were going to have a meeting, the two heads of these places, because the big one wanted to say to the little one, here, what do you think you're doing? Because now Chinese, if they like, can get over to us. It's almost sounding exciting now. So we, the principal of the president of the smaller country said, my wife hasn't got a dress. We need to get her a dress. Otherwise, I'm not going to that conference. I'm not going to that meeting because she's part of this meeting. The smaller country didn't have much money. And we were literally, as VIP officers, thinking, right, we were not only do you advance a venue, you back up, but also you sort of try to oil the wheels, so to speak, to make things happen, to prevent embarrassment and to get, but it will never be overtaking the security side of things. So we were going to Selfridges and got a very modest dress. It was about,
You chose it, did you?
Yeah, and they would charge. They would say, "Well, what do you think about this one?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's all right, it's all right. I think that one." And you're thinking this is ridiculous. The best thing, and then it was quite a shout to get them to the venue so that they could then get that meeting, so they could, because you know what it's like. You can't beat getting face to face, and you get that personality, and you sort problems out.
What was your most dangerous ever incident then?
There was a couple of times when I had a helicopter above me and I was pointing a gun at somebody who had just he'd been released from prison after 10 years, and he'd gone to a car dealer and said, "Well, I'll take it from here, thank you." And the guy was left the car and then called us. The helicopter found the car then, and it was abandoned. It was quite a trek up from the A38 up through a field. And it was one of those things where the red dot's sort of dancing on his white shirt, and the guy's there and he's just acting totally unpredictably. That's the worst thing, they're not reacting as they should. And so you're trying everything. You're trying it nice and calm. You're trying to dominate. Bang, bang, bang. That's not working. It's like, come on now, and that gun is there. And I knew if that had gone down there up like that, it would be undoubtable. Bang, and it would have been. It would have been about 6 years of utter hell being dragged through the courts and inquest.
Yeah, treated
with
like
everyone saying whatever. And of course, every minute of every second of your decision is being recorded by the helicopter above. And there was a couple of instances like that. But to be honest, there's more. I'm hiding behind a big gun, so I'm fine. It's those poor sods who, like, occasionally when I drove into a rave at the top of the hill in Mamhead near Dawlish. And I'm looking to see where the convoy of cars has gone. I drove straight into them, and they surrounded my car and trashed it. They trashed it, and I thought.
But they didn't have guns, presumably.
No, they didn't, but nor did I. But there's been situations where I've had taser, and I just thought, I'm not getting the taser out because they'll just use it on me. They'll overpower me. So
it must be much harder in the States, where everyone seems to have a gun, don't they?
Yeah, well, every incident they go to is a firearms incident. There's only a percentage of firearms incidents out of all police incidents in this country, but in America, every single one is a firearms incident, and thousands of them go without any problem. But because there are so many guns, they have to assume everybody's got a gun. And if you've got the hump, or if you've had a big argument with your missus, or if you've lost your job and you're facing misery, people will get the gun out and use it. So I mean, I know him, and so does Harry. We both know American cops, and I know one who has shot and killed someone because he was faced with a deadly threat. I mean, I do take my hat off to them. How they do it out there, I have absolutely no idea.
You haven't got a hat on.
No, you're right. Harry's got some behind him.
Oh yeah, Harry's got one. Well, I remember I once
the American one.
Right. I once did a gig at Hay on Wye, the big literary festival, and Bill Clinton was doing a talk on conflict resolution, and he was, and I remember arriving because it's a tiny little place, Hay on Wye. And there were suddenly all these kind of guys with dark glasses and earpieces, and apparently there were snipers. Snipers on the roof of the. And then I went along to Bill Clinton's gig. We were in the same venue, and I was on after him. So I used to say, Bill Clinton's my warm-up act. And he'd just finished. He'd left the presidency about 6 months before, and I couldn't do a sound check because they were searching the place for, I don't know, whatever you're looking for. And so, then I had to go on late. And then I ended up, when I went to Bill Clinton's gig at the end, I was meant to be on next. He was going around shaking hands. And I said, look, hurry up, Bill, I've got to do a bloody gig next. And then I was subsequently told that I was moments away from being like, arrested and bundled into a car and sent off to Guantanamo Bay.
I did. The trouble is, when you get these, especially with Queen visits and things like that, I couldn't divulge whether this was true or not because I would like to protect those snipers who I know very well, and one of which was on my section. So whenever someone's getting really trouble from Twitter, I tend to DM them and say, I do know a sniper if you really and they won't feel much. It'll just be a And they'd say to me, they go to me on my radio and go, "You all right? Okay, all right, Jim. Yeah, how are you? Yeah, I can just see line of sight. That's fine. Is your chest getting a bit warm? Is it?" I'm like, "Don't be you."
But I can't imagine. I mean, if you're a sniper, presumably you might spend your whole career but never actually shoot anyone, I suppose.
Oh, but we use them for their optical gathering. So especially in rural areas and in cities across skyscrapers, what they all do is stick one on the top, and they have got the best, so their sights. Yeah. We had one, for example, we want to know if you're looking in a building, get in that window, what's his demeanor? All right. So there's one with a shotgun, and it's his shotgun's in pieces. He's putting it together now. He's now marching around the room. He's looking completely psychotic. Right. Now he's put it on the bed again. He's now sitting on the bed. Right. So these sort of information like that is just invaluable. So a lot of the time, I do remember you.
Country, they don't want to. I mean, if they have to shoot someone, they will turn them, and they're highly trained to do so. But cops in this country don't want to shoot anyone because they know, well, nobody wants to kill anyone, and they know the crap they'll go through for years afterwards. Yeah. So
they say the basic course, the very basic for firearms, is 13 weeks, and they teach you 12 weeks, 1 week how to shoot someone dead and 12 weeks how to avoid it. And it's just everything is set about avoiding that position. And when there is a shooting, to be honest, the person who pulls the trigger is the least looked at. It's all the stuff behind it. How did that get into that position? How could you have avoided it?
So have you ever shot anyone then, Harry?
No, I haven't. I've been very fortunate, and luckily in this, although I know even in my force alone, in my service, in the last 35 years, which is prior, I've known 8 people in my force who've had to shoot people. So, and most of those dead. So it's when you think of the numbers, but a lot of it with the arms side of stuff that we use, it's very much a bit like Dave with his dog. You rarely have to release the dog. It's that domination. It's two guys dressed to the hilts with guns coming out saying, "Sit down, get down on the ground," like that. And they're like, all right. And that has really prevented things from escalating where you've needed to, because matey boy's got a machete up his back, on his way.
I've got another friend who was he was a murder detective, and he was cool. Yeah, he was telling me that when he first became one, he was interested to see how you interrogate prisoners. Someone who was a suspect. And he thought it would be this subtle thing. And apparently the bloke just looked at the suspect and said, "You did it, didn't you? You did it. Yeah, you did it, didn't you? Tell us you did it." And that was his technique, apparently.
We learned a bit more subtle, and it's a lot more, because I remember there's 5 processes, and the first was to befriend them and go, "You're right, yeah, I'm harmless. Look at me, I'm harmless. Want a cigarette?" This sort of thing. And then it was, and then you basically, and it was something, and then it was something that I used very much after that. You then said, "Okay, so what happened?" And you just sit back, and they just go da da da, and they go, "Oh, all right, it's not getting it."
The thing is with humans is we can't help ourselves. So if you try and get clever, actually you'll end up missing out. But if you just put in some simple basic questions, humans can't help themselves. They want to talk. They want to, whatever it be about, they want to tell you your life story. I mean, we can't get Harry to shut up, but I mean, sometimes you don't have to get clever. Yeah. Sometimes you don't have to get clever with the questioning. You can just, like Harry say, "What do you want to tell me?" And without, they'll try not to, but they just can't. They need to fill the.
But then when they have, then you tie them down onto those pits, and they think, "Oh God, I've spoken a bit much more than they were a bit free because they weren't being challenged, but because now they've said certain bits." So tell us a bit more about that. Well, how did you actually get there, and how could you have if you'd been? And that's it. But now, to be honest, we've all seen it on TV. What do they say? No comment. No comment.
Yeah, well, that's presumably what it's best to say if you're arrested.
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, and they say it's not, but it is, because then it's our job to prove it. It's a bit like dealing with your heckler, I'm sure. If you can actually get them engaging, then you build in some material, and then you can have them.
yeah, that's true. It's actually, you're right. It is similar. Yeah, because you get laughs at their expense eventually, and you prove you're the. Or another thing you can do is say, "Oh yeah, you think you're funny? You come up here and tell a joke." Because I remember once being in the audience, and there was a comedian on who was dying on his ass, and I think I heckled him a bit. And he said, "Oh yeah, you think you come up?" I went up and did about 25 minutes.
Arthur, I want to know where can people find you now? And obviously, the world is a bit.
His website. His website is brilliant.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Sophia for helping me with my website. A friend of yours, I believe, Harry. I'm meant to be, who knows? I may be going to the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. I've been up every year bar last year, more or less, for about 45 years. And I'm doing the show about my dad. I'm meant to be doing in places around, in various venues around the place. And, and sometimes I pitch up just doing 20 minutes in the back of a pub sometimes. I mean, I really miss performing, I have to say, and I'm not alone in this. All the comedians I know are just gasping to get some applause, and you kind of have to thrive on it. I have to get my missus to clap me every now and again and laugh just to sort of keep me going.
We'll give you a round of applause, please.
So
good.
It is. I know that's exactly, because I looked just doing a bit of research, and you were doing quite a few around Cornwall and things, and then this whole thing has put a stop to it, which must be so frustrating for you. Have you found online stuff? But you're doing radio still, aren't you? You're doing.
Yeah, in fact, I'm on in about, what's the time? In about an hour and a half, interviewing someone on Radio 4. Yeah, and I do Radio 4 Extra, the comedy club. And I may yet be doing a series with me and Miriam Margolyes, just chatting, because she's a right hoot, Miriam.
She's hilarious. She's very, anybody who doesn't know who she is, she's very blue.
She's brilliant. Oh, yeah.
There's no one like Miriam, that's for sure.
Yeah. Go on.
And I'm lucky. I mean, most comedians, if that's all they do, everything's gone. They've got no income. But also, I do the voiceover for a TV show called Money for Nothing, which is on the Arters, which you might have seen. It's quite popular. Where about a woman goes out and rescues stuff that people are about to chuck on the skip, and then repurposes it upcycles it into some sort of something a bit posher, and then they flog it on. And it's a great program, and I've been lucky to do that. Oh, and I'm the voice of the dad of a potato on, which I think starts today.
Potato Head now, I hope.
No. This is a different one. This is Dave Spud. It's a cartoon. In fact, it starts tonight, I believe.
What channel's that on?
Yeah, good question. I'm sure it's possible to find out.
Well, while you're doing that, okay. But Sophia Chowdhury Khan is, you say my friend, and it's because I've met her through Ben Pearson, who's a police officer we had on this, and she has been brilliant. She's absolutely brilliant. I think she's going to send me a big bill, because if it is, I'm just going to have to sell the house, because she's been so good. I mean, she's from Canny Comms, and she did actually say the first time she met you. Arthur is when she was at it was like the comedy club or something similar, if you don't mind. I forget which way. And she said I was standing next to this guy, and there was a comedian on, and she said, "Oh God, I tell you, he was rubbish. He was absolutely rubbish." And so I said to him, "God, isn't he rubbish? He's going anywhere." And she said, "This guy was out. Yeah, well, you have your bad days, don't you, and all that." And she said, "You went off and you just chatted for a bit, and I think you had a drink at the bar or something." And then she said the guy disappeared, and the next thing I realised he was comparing the comedy show, and it was Arthur. So, yeah.
Well, at least it wasn't the bloke on the stage dying on his arse.
No, I know. I thought but it definitely wasn't that. But with that, do you then? We won't keep you too long, because you've got your stuff for your other show and things like that. But do you have? Do you get that sort of pressure still when you think, do you know what, or is it something that you find almost second nature? And if things do slide a bit, then you think, don't what, you can dismiss it straight and things will be better the next day or something, you know.
Well, I mean, you have to bear in mind that every audience is slightly different from every other audience. And so what I find is early on, I'll drop like a gag that nearly always gets a big laugh.
Right.
And you sort of tell from the size of the laugh how much the audience is going to be into you, probably. And so if there's not much of a laugh, you know it's going to be a bit of a tougher gig, or you might have offended someone in the second row or something.
Yeah.
Every audience is different, and that's one of the great things about live comedy is that first off, the response is immediate and audible. It's not like in the opera or plays, or you know, if you're getting laughs, you're doing well. If you're not getting laughs, you're not doing well. Yeah. And it's you know, and it's not like you're going through lines from a play that you're actually you know, you're bringing it yourself.
Yeah,
and you can at any moment. Yeah, and you know, sometimes you can go off on a bit of an improvised session, and but I've always got some jokes at the back of my head if things are going badly that I know are liable to get laughs. I'll give you a couple if you like.
Yeah, go on, do it.
Go on then.
This way, like. Did you know this statistic about Americans? Did you know 1 out of 3 Americans weighs as much as the other 2? That always gets a laugh. If that didn't get a laugh,
yeah.
I'm going to message my mates that one later.
Well, there's another one actually. Honestly, when my girlfriend's coming up to her period, we could only agree on one thing: we both wish I was dead.
I'm going to use
feel free
if I'm brave enough. That's brilliant. What's the difference with your walking tours then? What do you do with your walking tours?
Well,
are you going to start those again?
Yeah, well, it started out in Edinburgh in the mid-'80s when I was doing a show at midnight or something. So I thought I've got to find some way to entertain myself during the afternoons. So I started doing, they were really kind of parodies of the walking tours of the Royal Mile in Edinburgh, where I knew the real stuff that the proper tour guys would say, but I used to add stuff, and I'd say, and that's where, you know, Billy Bremner used to have a flat up there with Jimmy James Dean. I'll just make shit up, and I'd get the audience. I'll say there's an old law here that says you have to crawl this next bit, so I get them to crawl. And then I'd have people, I'd sign up like an opera singer in a window up the top, suddenly come out and start singing. And and then I took to doing them late at night. And so like 2 o'clock in the morning, I would start. And I still do them every year. Not this year, gone. And everyone's a bit pissed. And actually, that's another time I got arrested at the end of one of them once.
I remember. You did. You got. Well, oh, right. Did you?
Yeah.
You just slipped that in at the end.
Go on. Well, because I discovered there was a friend of mine who was quite notorious. He used to ring up the police every time I started, saying there's trouble up on the Royal Mile, and it was quite loud. And then there'd been a bit of nudity. I can't remember if it was me. And anyway, I got arrested for breach of the peace and possession of a megaphone. Apparently.
It did remind me actually when we were on Union Street in Plymouth. We used to get a little bit bored of the same thing, and it was either fighting all night, or else everyone wanted to fight a police officer, or it was, and we used to make up these bylaws to see what we could get away with. So we would be 2 women, and they'd be holding their shoes and say, "Madam, do you mind? Sorry, there's a bylaw that you have to wear your shoes." And they're like, "Oh, right." And then we think, "Okay, that's cool."
On the railways, BTP, you can get away with that because they literally have thousands and I know a few BTP cops. They've got a bylaw just about everything from falling asleep.
We used to get people
snoring on the track.
They're real laws.
Oh,
No. Oh, yours.
Have a look. No, there are some really bizarre BTP laws. I'll get you. Have a look, Arthur. You might be able to get some gags out of it. I
always remember Sid he had to go and because as I understand it, the British Transport Police can't actually arrest anyone properly. Is that right? Anyway, they couldn't.
Well, they can. But yeah, it's a funny one.
Because he once, I mean, he didn't want to. He was once called to Waterloo Station where they caught a guy, cottaging or something. He was gay, and it was illegal then, effectively, to be gay. And my dad had to arrest him. He really didn't want to. But he always remembered the bloke said, and he was a doctor from St Thomas's, the guy who was supposed to be arrested. And he always said, well, he said to my dad, if you spent a night with me, you'd never want another woman again. Which he'd always remember with great affection.
Do you see? I used to, because people say that, and I was like, well, I always try something once, but I might give that one a miss for now. It's good. It's brilliant stuff. Look,
we're getting lots of rounds of applause, Arthur. So hopefully,
good.
They're all still little emojis.
Well, thank you. Yay.
Yeah, it is brilliant. Pretty good. Oh, somebody, one question here was, Arthur, is he scripted on Made for Nothing, or are his words his own? Or is it a bit of both, I would imagine?
It's a bit of both. There is a sort of given script, and then I sometimes wing my way around it a bit as we do it. And sort of, because I've got a slightly sceptical tone to it, because, I mean, some of the shit you see that they buy that.
Yeah, no, it's good.
I have to suggest that rather than actually say it out loud. The Rubbish World of Dave Spud tonight at 6:30 on CITV. Excellent. I'm the potato. It's Johnny Vegas is Dave Spud, and I'm his dad.
What? Sorry. Yeah. You and Johnny Vegas did the voiceover for a kids program, and it stayed clean.
Yeah. Well, we didn't write the script, obviously. It's really fun. It's a surreal thing. It's a wonderful. I really recommend you watch it. You can't even believe what they get up to.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a look.
Well, I'm going to exit full stream and leave meeting, I think.
Thank you very much. Thank you ever so much, Arthur. It's really lovely having you here. Cheers, my friend.
Oh, he's got rid of him. He's gone.
I got rid of him a bit early, I'm afraid. But because he's got to get on. So I thought if it's anything like my wife's goodbyes, they took about 25 minutes. So I was going to do us all a favour in this one. No, he needs to get off. But Dave, lovely to speak to you. He's a top man, isn't he?
Yeah.
Really enjoy him. So thank you ever so much.
Thanks now.
We're still online for everyone. So we'll just say, everyone, thank you very much indeed. I am going to say goodbye to you. Quickly, I think the rugby is on if you're interested in that side of things. In the meantime, goodbye. And we've got some guests coming up. We're just sorting out the dates. We've got quite a few, about 4 or 5 guests coming up. So it's looking good. Stay safe out there and get a suntan. Cheers.